Big news for today about 10.1, and in particular for today we are talking about Mythic Plus. So Blizzard has released a few bits of news related to what's gonna come in the next future patches. We have, of course, as mentioned even in the previous video, the official release date of patch 10.0.7, which is going to be March the 21st, so in a couple of resets. That was the most obvious one to guess, the most obvious one to predict. What was, of course, a little bit harder, obviously, was the new Mythic Plus dungeon pool that was going to come in Season 2. This was Blizzard's decision to split the Mythic Plus pool with the first 4 Dragonflight dungeons in the first season of Mythic Plus, with 4 old dungeons to complete the pool, and then the other 4 Dragonflight dungeons in Season 2 with 4 more old dungeons. So basically, up to this point, we only knew about 50% of the dungeons in Season 2. Obviously, Bracken Hollow, Halls of Infusion, Neltarus, and Uldaman, the ones that are currently available in Normal, Heroic, and Mythic 0 in Dragonflight. We obviously had no idea about the ones that Blizzard was going to take from older expansions. So in Season 1, we had Halls of Valor and Court of Stars, which were both from Legion, Temple of the Jade Serpent, which was from Mists of Pandaria, and then Shadowmoon Boyar Grounds, which was from Warlords. The news are that in Season 2 we lose any dungeons from Worlds of Draenor, because there's gonna be 0. We gain 1 dungeon from Cataclysm, we go back to still have 1 dungeon from Legion, and now we have the new entries of BFA. The dungeons returning are going to be Neltharion's Lair, Freehold, Underrot, and the Vortex Pinnacle. It's gonna be likely a pretty well-received list of Mythic Plus dungeons if we go back to BFA, especially if you did not play Mythic Plus in BFA. Freehold was one of the more enjoyed and one of the more played type of dungeons in Mythic Plus, at least, so that's a good one. Underrot was also a decent one in Mythic Plus. You also had Neltharion's Lair in Legion, which wasn't one of the absolute best, but was definitely on the easy side, on the good side of Mythic Plus from Legion. And then, of course, we can't say much about Vortex Pinnacle, because all we get from Cataclysm were just, you know, basic heroic dungeons. So that is definitely going to be the more interesting one to see in its Mythic Plus version. What is likely perhaps going to be much more important for the future of Mythic Plus, even now that we know these new 4 dungeons, is going to be how tuned are going to be the Dragonflight dungeons, because there have been quite many people shivering in fear at the idea of having dungeons like Brackenhide Hollow at a +24 fortified, or something like Neltharus on Tyrannical, or what's gonna happen to the absolute horrendous length of Uldaman as a Mythic Plus dungeon. That seems to be one of the more pressing problems in Mythic Plus looking towards Season 2. So at the very least we get a positive start, in the sense that the older dungeons being added to the pool don't seem to be that problematic. For sure, at least Neltharion's Lair, Freehold, and Underrot, all 3 of them have already been tested, tried, and played in Mythic Plus, so it does not seem like there is going to be too many problems on these 3 dungeons. The only one that might cause some problems is going to be Vortex Pinnacle, but overall it seems like a pretty good, for the players, I mean, for the frustrations of the players, it seems like a pretty good set of older dungeons to introduce in Mythic Plus. As I said, what is likely going to give players more of a headache is the new set of dungeons added in Mythic Plus pool from current expansion from Dragonflight. What is also going to be part of the discussion, though, of Mythic Plus isn't just the fact that we have a new dungeon pool in Season 2, but also that for the first time in a long time, pretty much since Legion, basically, we are not going to have a seasonal affix, because we lose Thundering, that's expected. We lose Thundering at the end of Season 1, but we are not going to get Thundering replaced by something else. There is not going to be an extra affix in Season 2. This was something that was pointed out by quite a few players as a question mark in Dragonflight, because many times this was pointed out, the reason why a seasonal affix exists is because you have the same dungeons from the start of the expansion to the finish. In Shadowlands, you get to Mythic Plus week 1 and you go and do the Necrotic Wake, and 1 week before the end of the expansion you are still going in there and playing Necrotic Wake. The same dungeons for like 2 years. But once Dragonflight came out, we got to know that we were going to have completely different dungeons, at the very least for the first 2 seasons. If the point of a seasonal affix is to spice things up a bit every season so that the dungeons, feel different, what's the point of having an affix like that in an expansion that is going to give you different dungeons every season? There is no reason to have a seasonal affix in Season 2 if all of the dungeons are going to be different than the dungeons from Season 1. That is going to be what spices things up a bit already. You don't need an extra affix on top of that. And that is indeed the justification that the lead game designer Morgan Day points out. The only extra point which might bring us to change a few things about the affixes is going to be the level 7 affix pool. So we are talking about Quaking, Grievous, Volcanic, Storming and Explosive. The answer to this is that they are going to be taking a closer look at this bucket of affixes and how much of an opportunity is going to be for counterplay with these affixes. How much of that is making your healer's life harder versus how much of that there is an opportunity where if I play really well, I can negate this affix and use my utility really well, etc, etc. So we're going to be taking a look at the whole level 7 bucket of affixes so that along the lines of an affix refresh for that bucket, as well as no, of course, level 10 affix. I believe we can chalk up these news about 10.1 as very positive overall. The fact that the added dungeons from old expansions are all pretty good and already tested and tried in Mythic Plus, at least 3 out of 4 of them, so that's pretty good. And then the fact that we get rid of Thundering, which was already a good news in general, but also that there is not going to be an extra seasonal affix to take place of Thundering. I think overall that sounds pretty good for the future of Mythic Plus. All that's left, of course, is, as we talked in the previous video, is to get this 10.1 in the PTR. So we will start the next patches cycle in the PTR quite soon. So we will have more news about the patch quite soon. All that's left at this point is to just wait. So as we keep waiting, I guess, we are going to leave each other on this Thursday. Thanks, of course, as usual. We are starting our goodbyes with the thanks to all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel. There are still, of course, ways to show your support completely for free. Liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself, are good enough ways to show your support. You can also support by following me over on Twitter, as well as following me on my stream over on Twitch. So, with these social unpleasantries out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, we got away with one. I was dreading some awfully clunky dungeons for Mythic Plus in Season 2, but I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with what we are getting.